Okay, well, if nobody else has anything, we are lucky to have a presentation from a graduating PAG. And it's Jill Williams she is the Deputy Director of National Urea Cycle Disorder Foundation and UCDF. And I'll let Jill take over.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. Sorry, it just rearranged my screen here. Trying to put everything back. Okay, good. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is the story of our organization, the National Urea Cycle Disorders Foundation, and our 20-year partnership with the Urea Cycle Disorders Consortium. Let's see, I'm trying to get it to advance. There we go. I have only been with NUCDF for about a year. So I talked at length with Teresa in putting this together and did some digging into our history. Many of you will recognize the woman on the left here. That is Cindy Lamons. She served as president of NUCDF for 2+ decades. She was also the co-PI for the UCDC and served as the CPAG chair a few years, or I don't know, in the recent past. And she, many of the accomplishments I'm going to share today are largely due to Cindy, her smarts, her organizational skills, her unwavering commitment to our patient community. She was truly a fantastic leader, and she passed away in June 2022. Which was really a blow to our organization and to the UCDC. But fortunately, Teresa Warner was available and picked up the ball and has really been running with it. She worked hand in hand with Cindy since her daughter was diagnosed with OTC, one of our 8 disorders, in 1998. She served as our board chair since 2002 and took over as the role of executive director in 2022. So this is the reason that I am here today. This is my nephew. He has one of the urea cycle disorders called citrullinemia. He was unfortunately missed on diagnosis. He was born healthy, went into a coma, and stayed in the coma for 11 days with extremely high ammonia levels, which caused permanent brain damage. But once they figured out what was going on, they gave him medication. He was able to wake back up again. And his life has been much better than they predicted when he was born. He has survived with a great deal of help from my sister and her husband, and who had pretty intensive involvement in his care and the medical management for many, many years. About 10 years ago, he had a liver transplant, which for him was transformative. His care has become a great deal easier. And they're even now talking about him moving into an independent facility outside of their home, which would not have been possible without the liver transplant. So when Cindy was ill, she had asked Teresa to reach out to me, knowing my background in research, to help out with a few things. So I did jump in and help where I was able. And then I officially joined the team at NUCDF in August of 2023. This is the original leadership of of the Urea Cycle Disorders Consortium. Mark Batshaw was the original PI of the consortium. Without these individuals' commitment to our community, their guidance, and their collaboration with the patient community, we would definitely not be where we are today. This is the current UCDC leadership. Andrea Grotman and Sandesh Nagamani are the co-PIs. So this is an illustration of the urea cycle. The urea cycle disorders are a group of genetic conditions that affect your ability to metabolize protein and remove ammonia from your blood. I've seen or heard the physicians describe it, this as sort of a traffic circle. And when there's a block in one of the intersections in the traffic circle, things back up and things can't proceed normally. For UCDs, when there's a block in the cycle, ammonia builds up. Ammonia is a waste product from the metabolism of protein. It's toxic and can cause a coma, brain injury, or death if it's not removed. So urea cycle disorders include 8 separate disorders. Most are autosomal recessive. One is X-linked, which is OTC. That is our most common disorder. They are treated by limiting your protein intake, taking a nitrogen scavenger medicine for many folks, and supplements. Liver transplant, as I mentioned, is also an option. Several gene and mRNA therapies are currently under development. Diagnosis remains a major challenge in our community. All of these disorders have multiple presentations. They can be neonatal onset, which tends to be the most severe. They can be late onset, which is milder. And the severity really depends on the level of enzyme activity. So it's unfortunately true that somebody can seem normal and go through their entire life and have some sort of incident, such as sinus surgery, and the UCD will become activated, and that's probably not the correct term, but basically they'll go into a coma, or begin to be very disoriented, which looks like alcohol or drug intoxication, go into a coma, and if an ammonia test is not performed, they can die. And this unfortunately happens every year to many people with UCDs. So we're continuously looking to improve diagnosis. We're running a campaign called Check Ammonia right now to raise awareness of that issue, both for neonatal and late onset. And we're also supporting a yeast genetics project to better understand the variants and the level of severity that's associated with them, because newborn screening is now identifying people with very, very mild variants, and they want to know what that means for them. So we're working in a lot of different levels right now. This is the Urea Cycle Disorders Consortium map for our clinical sites. We have 16 sites total, 13 in the US, plus Canada, Zurich, and Heidelberg, Germany. Administrative core is at Children's National Medical Center. Short history of UCD research is that the urea cycle was first identified and described in 1932. The disorders were discovered sequentially over the next, 50 years. The first therapy, which is called a nitrogen scavenger, was developed in the 70s and 80s and finally approved by FDA in the 1990s. In the early 2000s, with the passage of the Rare Diseases Act and the rise of RDCRN, UCDC was one of the first groups funded in 2004. So from the beginning, between NUCDF and the research community, there was a very, very close collaboration. Dr. Saul Brusillo from Johns Hopkins, who developed the first nitrogen scavenger, led our first board meeting. In 1994, NUCDF assisted in the clinical trial of that medication, sodium phenylbutyrate, which is called Bufanol, which was ultimately approved in 1996. So among our patient community, there aren't many people still alive born prior to that medication coming into widespread use. So many of our older patients are approaching age milestones for the first time that nobody in our community has reached before. So it's raising lots of questions, and it's good news that we now have these treatments, but it's also challenging as we're trying to figure out how to help those folks as they're moving into older ages. In 2000, NUCDF and pulled together the research community to convene the first consensus guidelines meeting, advocated for passage of the Rare Diseases Act, and then partnered with the clinical researchers to launch the UCDC. So we are very fortunate that this partnership through the years has led to several approved treatments. The first, of course, was Bufanol. Next was Aminol, which is an IV rescue medication for people who are in a severe ammonia hyperammonemic event. Then Carbaglu was developed for NAG-S disease, one of the 8 urea cycle disorders. Ravicti was developed as an advanced form of sodium phenylbutyrate, which has less salt in it because some people in our patient community were having heart attacks at a young age due to the high salt content. This medication is one that's currently approved in Europe and no longer available in the United States. So we are hoping, and this is working its way through the FDA approval process, that it will become available in the not too distant future. We've also partnered with formula companies to help develop improved low protein formulas. So through the years, the partnership has led to more than 25 joint family conferences held at the same time and location as our scientific meetings. So we've really tried to support that interaction and interplay between the patient community and the researcher community from the beginning. We've partnered in a 20-year longitudinal study, which now has more than 1,000 patients enrolled. UCDC was continuously funded for 4 cycles of the RDCRN. I think it's one of only a few that have been able to say that. Our organization, NUCDF, established fellowship awards in 2008, and we are very pleased that our awards over the years have supported new leaders, including Sandesh Nagamani and Lindsay Burridge, who are now in our leadership, as well as others who are important to our community. We funded one of the first, we didn't fund, we partnered with UCDC, a researcher named Nick Amu from Children's National, on one of the first comparative effectiveness studies in rare diseases. And the focus of that one was on liver transplant versus medical management, because that is a decision point that our community needs to reach at some point in their care. And it's a complicated and difficult decision to choose to have a liver transplant. And it's right for some patients and not right for others. The partnership has led to the recognition of new biomarkers, such as plasma ammonia and glutamine, which has supported the approval of various treatment options. Our medical advisory board partners with NUCDF to develop a 3-part series on COVID and vaccines early in the rise of COVID, which was a great way to spread information out for our patient community. Also, the research has been the foundation for many of our education and outreach efforts. We've long been involved in newborn screening advocacy. We've got the Check Ammonia campaign running right now, and we are soon going to be launching a teleecho program to spread the learning from our expert community out more broadly in the clinician community. So after 20 years of research, we found many answers, but we also have many new questions. So while we have new treatment options available, we are still struggling to answer specific questions about which treatment is best for which patients and how we can fill the remaining gaps for those patients who still don't have treatments available. Newborn screening is common for only 3 out of our 8 disorders, and sadly true that there are patients who find out their newborn screening results, or families who discover them only after their child has died in the hospital. That happens too often. So how can we speed up results? Should newborn genetic screening be the standard? And what are the implications of mild variants? Liver transplant can be a life-changing option, but it's not curative. And even after a patient has had a transplant, they still have lifelong care related to their UCDs. For example, my nephew still has to take arginine, which means he still has a G tube, which is actually interfering with his ability to get into long-term care facilities right at the moment. So many complicated issues there. I mentioned our patients reaching new age milestones for the first time. They're running into educational challenges, transition to adulthood, pregnancy questions, aging, and long-term treatment effects, because all of these medications were new, so we don't really know what the long-term effects are. New treatment modalities are on their way, such as gene therapy and mRNA treatments. How are those going to play into the decision-making process for somebody with a 2-year-old with OTC who's fairly stable but may not be long, and they're not clear what the cognitive impacts of continuing medical management will be. And so it's just a really complicated landscape. Diagnosis, as I mentioned, remains a huge challenge. And while we have a well-established expert network, and we are very grateful to them, there remains geographic gaps in our coverage. Patients who are born in the wrong geographic area are too far from the clinical care centers. There are barriers to telemedicine, and there's still a disconnect from the frontline providers. Through all of this, this quote has always spoken to me, and it just reminds me of everything that NUCDF and UCD together accomplished through the years. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed patients can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And it's really fortunate for our patient community that all of this has happened. But yet our work is not done. So moving forward, this is sort of the driving goal for what we're trying to achieve now. If you want to go fast, to go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So our goal is to build new partnerships, expand our network, and so number one is to keep the UCDC research community together. There's always a draw from pharma and changing institutional priorities for researchers and physicians to shift their focus. And we don't want to lose anybody in our current community. We want to more strongly integrate the patient voice into planning and develop a patient-centered research roadmap. We're currently seeking funding to enable that project and support within UCDC. Strengthen ties with European and Asian research communities, integrate frontline clinicians into our community, and overall increase accessibility for patients to care. We want to continue supporting early stage investigators, expand our dietitian community, integrate industry as research partners, grow and diversify our patient community. You know, we have the same diversity challenges that other rare diseases face in terms of geography, ethnicity, race, disorders, ages, and whether or not patients are transplanted. You know, we also want to focus on developing the next generations of leaders for our organization because sustainability of our patient group is key. Toward that end, we've recently developed a patient advisory committee, and we have now 11 volunteers who are incredibly committed and smart and bringing in lots of fresh ideas. So we're looking forward to working with them moving forward. You know, also expanding relationships with other patient groups, learning from them and working with them, and, you know, and always improving and expanding data collection. So some challenges and lessons learned. You know, again, I apologize that Cindy would be the one that would be best suited to give this presentation, but you know, obviously that is not possible. So Teresa and I talked this over a little bit. So if we were offering advice to new people coming in, we would say start sustainability planning on day one, both for your consortium and for your patient group. You know, if as a patient group you don't have a succession plan in place, my advice would be start that. You know, it's important also to codify the role of the patient group within the consortium so that transitions are going to be easier moving forward. And also, you know, I really love the model that Janet Heischetter presented recently, where their patient group is at the center of the consortium from day one. I think that's a model that makes a lot of sense. Researchers and institutions and their focus come and go, but the patient community remains. So challenges, a lack of academic affiliation has been a barrier for us. This was a surprise to me. I came from an academic medical center background, but suddenly not having access to journal articles, you know, research training availability, grant support from a centralized office. These are all things that are really challenging when you're on the patient side of this work. We would recommend negotiating agreements with industry at the beginning of treatment development where possible. You know, as you all know, data collection is challenging, you know, both for the longitudinal study and for our patient registry. And finally, you know, gather input from everyone and find what best fits for you. So on that note, Teresa and I both want to thank many, many people within RDCRN for the support that you've provided her and me as we've stepped into Cindy's shoes, you know, particularly the people here listed on this slide, Tracy Hart from the OI Foundation, Michelle Mannion from the PCD Foundation, Kristen Whedon of the United Porphyrias Association, Janet Heischetter from the Dystonia Medical Research Foundation, Ellen Kodroff from the Cured Foundation. Thank you. You have all taken time out of your schedules and helped us work our way through this maze. So thank you. Also from the DMCC, my friends and contacts, thank you for your help. Eileen King, Michael Sade, Raj Gifford, and Dakota Campbell. I appreciate all you've done. Thank you. And that's it.
Thank you. That was fantastic work. And I put it in the chat, but you're doing a wonderful job, Jill, and you are a very special aunt. Your family is lucky to have your support like that. Does anybody have any questions for Jill?
I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
This is Tracy. Jill, that was great. That was a great presentation. Your your second to last, well, it might have been third last slide where before lessons learned, that other slide that
Mhm.
talked about just kind of everything you've done, just in your own opinion. I mean, how long would it have taken you to get there if you didn't have this? You know, if you didn't have the RDCRN or participating, I mean, there were so many things that you listed there. And I feel the same way. I mean, I feel like we've accelerated everything that we're able to do as a patient advocacy organization because of our, you know, of this family. So I didn't know your thoughts there.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I mean, for me personally, I'm grateful that I had 3 years within the RDCRN to learn about this community and to sort of have a chance to study it and talk to so many people and understand the issues and get to know things. So one of the things that I think I skipped over saying this, when Cindy was very, very ill and passing things on to Teresa, she suggested to Teresa that she reach out to me, which at the time I was like, wow, that was like very surprising to me. Because while I knew Cindy, I did not work with her terribly closely. I'd known her for 20 years. But I think Cindy knew how important having a connection to this group was and how much Teresa was going to need that because Teresa was not part of an academic medical center. So I think that's where Teresa and I make a really good team because she has a better understanding of the medical condition, having been a caregiver for 20 years. And I have a better understanding of sort of the academic medical research environment, so putting the two of us together has helped us. And we still have a lot of information gaps that we're trying to seal.
Thanks.
Did that answer you, Tracy?
It does. Yeah. Thanks. That was just such a good slide, that second to third or last slide. It was just very powerful, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. And it always shocks me how it doesn't matter what the underlying condition is. There are so many similarities in all of the things that we're all dealing with, the challenges and the wins. So excellent presentation. Thank you so much. And boy, do we miss Cindy.
Mm.
I have a question. So I know for you guys, Cindy was a PI in the consortium, and I know Tracy, you are for yours. I don't know if anybody else is. I'm not sure, but I know that seemed to be, as you talk about just cementing the role or the of the PAG within the consortium, so that even as the consortium, say, rolls off of RDCRN, like that connection is there. So upon Cindy passing away, that connection was lost. And so it's kind of for you and Tracy, for other PAGs in thinking about whether they're continuing on with the consortium or they're looking at sustainability. How important do you feel that connection has been to your success? And what would you say to other PAGs who, in order to, like, how did you make that happen, or how could that happen, or what's a way to sort of move towards that if it doesn't exist within their environment?
I'll go first, Jill. I mean, for us, it was Brendan Lee, it was Dr. Lee. I mean, that's how he submitted the application, because he gets it. He understands that, patient community is what this is all about. So it's all him. But having said that, I mean, it's just made a world of difference to be at the table I'm on the executive committee as a PI. I mean, all the decisions that are being made with data and everything else, if I don't have the knowledge, I at least have them to, communicate it to me in lay language, and, so we can make those decisions together. So I think I owe it to him. And probably Sandesh, comes from that that line. So maybe that's, I don't know.
Yeah. And, I think that Cindy did not, and I'm not sure of the exact dates, but I think Cindy did not become a co-PI until much later in the grant process. I think maybe the fourth cycle. And I mean, Mark Batshaw had been the PI prior to that, and he was extremely strong. And Cindy was really a true partner, but I don't think that it was formally codified in any of the documents. So, you know, when Cindy passed away, I don't think that it was automatic that her role would pass to Teresa. I think that we're fortunate that Cindy did have such a strong role and a good relationship, and that our research community understood the importance of patient partnerships, and Teresa was able to step into that role. Because I don't know, honestly, if there was anything formally in writing. That's why I say I think it's important to codify that the role is the person in charge of the patient organization, not the individual that was in that role. So it's the chair rather than the person sitting in the chair. That it's the partnership between the patient foundation or the patient organization and the research community. If that makes sense.
Their relationship is just key, and I just think that this whole experience being in the consortium has made it even so much. We always had a good relationship with certain physicians and researchers, but being part of this for the past 8 years has strengthened that and brought us to so many more researchers. I mean, they really do understand the participation. They need us and we need them, and it's really a great partnership. Does anyone else have any more questions for Jill?
Yeah, I have a quick question. You may or may not be able to answer it. I'm just wondering how the level of respect or inclusiveness has changed between patient advocacy groups and researchers and clinicians over time. Like, do you feel that it's maybe a little less paternalistic, listen to what I have to say, I'm the doctor, to let's discuss this together? How much of a change have you or any of you been witness to, you know, during the course of your RDCRN?
Yeah, I mean, I cannot speak to the long-term history, but I know that for Teresa stepping into Cindy's role, I think that she was very intimidated at the beginning and didn't feel empowered to speak. And it was by meeting with them frequently and building up the relationship and her own confidence that she was really able to finally step into that role. And I think she firmly has it in hand now, but it was not an easy transition initially. Michelle?
I think our relationship has really strengthened, and like an equal, we're all at the table equal. I don't feel like any one researcher could say, this is the way we're going to do it, and we're not listening to the PAGs. That never happens. We have a voice at every single meeting. They take, whether it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes, what does each PAG have to say? What have you been doing for the past month? And, you know, how could we get involved? And not only with researchers, I've seen it with industry. Like, I've been doing this. I started this foundation close to 22 years ago. And when I first started, I mean, we had relationship with one researcher and that was it. And obviously that has grown so much, but with industry, I mean, it just sometimes floors me because I always say there's people who do this for a profession. I'm a mom and I do this because started this because of my daughter and now because of obviously so many people, but that the industry people come to us as equals and they want our voice and they want to hear what the patients need. It still blows my mind. It's like, do they know who I am or do they know who we are? You know, and they just keep coming for more and more advice from us because they appreciate our knowledge. And that is just, this past 8 years has really made all of that grow, I think.
So we were one of the early 4 cycle groups too that will be sunsetting here, but I do think there's been a tremendous change just across the field of diseases and patient engagement in diseases, because I do think at first it took a little while to develop trust. So even if we knew these researchers, we knew them at a different level, and you know, meeting twice a month for 20 years, you really do develop relationships. So I think a whole paper could be written on how the interactions between patient groups and researchers were improved by involvement in this consortium. These
Please,
consortia. If
please
anybody's
write that
interested.
paper.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I have one more question. I mean, part of it is I'm encouraging you to write the paper, but also what are some things, and I'm sorry if I'm hijacking your meeting, Raj, what are some things that we have new groups coming on? And the one thing I have heard from patient advocacy groups when they first come on, it's like, oh, I don't know if I can say anything, or oh, they're doctors. I'm like, oh, they're people. You know, it's how to help instill that confidence in themselves that they're valued members, and how can we do that early on? Do you have thoughts or ideas on that?
So the one thing that I would say is that, I mean, I had plenty of issues with lack of confidence and feeling I had no idea what we were talking about. And I'd go to these meetings and understand about 1/8 of what was being said. But my role there was to be a partner and to be the patient voice. And the rest of it could come with time. So I think if they just can look at this like there's a lot of different needs when you're trying to build a consortium. Their role isn't to be the people that understand all the science back to front. Their role is to be the partner and bring in the other information for the science and research people. I think that might be helpful. Kind of take the burden off of them of feeling like they have to suddenly become experts in biochemistry and stuff.
Yeah, and I also think, helping them recognize that they are experts in these conditions. They're the ones who live with them 24/7. They're the ones who've been dealing with them their entire life or their entire children's lives, And I also think that, starting at the very beginning, planning for the end, is going to help put the focus on the patient group, because I don't see any of these consortia continuing without a patient group at the center or being in some major pivotal role. I don't see the researchers or any of these individual institutions stepping up to manage care for kids with UCDs. It's going to be the patient groups helping to guide things into the next step. Certainly not alone, but probably not going to happen without them.
I think a mentor system or a buddy system for new groups that are onboarding would be very helpful, so that they can understand how to share their value and integrate into their consortia readily. And I also think that the PIs really tend to value, like, once you're at we have a seat at the table, and there is so much value in what we offer, not only from the patient perspective, but also a business perspective that we offer. So I know within the Porphyrias Consortium, we are valued members at the table, and we're, like many of you just said, we're integrated into all the decisions, and we really work together as a consortia.
Yeah.
Quickly, just to build on Kristen really quickly. Sorry, Tracy.
It's okay.
I think one thing I'm going to make note of for us to discuss further, because we've talked about maybe this mentoring or buddy system within the PAGs, maybe there's a way we can also leverage that for the PIs, whether it's having a couple of PIs that really get it, and figuring out a way for them to share it with incoming PIs or other PIs, whether that's a town hall, some sort of, I don't know, something where it may be a little harder to make it happen one-on-one, but maybe there's a way we can think about how, as PAGs, we can help create a channel to do that for the PIs as well. So when you said that, Kristen, made me think of it. So sorry, Tracy, to jump in ahead of you.
No. Yeah, that's great. And just real quickly to follow up with Kristen and Michelle both. I mean, we do bring value from lots of different perspectives, but we also have to follow through. I think they have to trust us as well. If we say, okay, we're going to do, our scientific meeting that we host every year is going to focus on blah, blah. We have to be that partner that always produces as well and follows through. So it's just as the responsibility is on us as well, I guess maybe that's not the right word, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Just a comment, Raj's comments made me think about something. So the American Thoracic Society has a PAG coalition, and we sponsor abstract scholarships. So we will pay, the PAG groups will pay the money for people with good abstracts, good posters to come to ATS. And as part of this, they have the opportunity and also the requirement to share their research with all the PAG representatives at ATS. And this year, for the first time, we told them, you have 5 minutes and you have to make this accessible to a lay audience. And you would be shocked at the number of them who said, well, I just can't do it. It's science. I can't do that. And so we came back to them with, that is your job. If you want to be working with patients, that is your job. And you need to figure out a way to do it. And it worked really well, but it does have to be coming from both sides, where the recognition that, patients are a big part of it, whatever you do, and be thinking of them even while you're in school and learning stuff.
Going back also to what you said, Raj, about the mentoring program, because I know I've been part of trying to plan that, and it hasn't really come out the way we wanted it to. And I think people are kind of shy to ask for help or say they need help. So maybe when we have incoming PAGs, at that point, we could just partner with them with a volunteer. And so they don't have to really ask. And maybe that partnering PAG who's been existing could reach out to that new PAG and say, hey, let's set up a call. And that way they're not having to ask. They're just kind of given that help immediately from somebody. Just a thought in the future, because the mentoring program hasn't taken off the way we would have liked to have seen it happen. Something to keep in mind. Is there any more questions or comments for Jill, or just the topic that we've drifted off to? Which is a great topic.
Great job, Jill.
Well,
The
yeah.
only comment, oh, go ahead, Jim.
Oh, I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
Only comment I want to say is to address the comment of writing the paper about the PAG interactions. Kristen Whedon has led that, and we've written one regarding what we learned at the spring meeting. It's been reviewed, and we got quite a few comments back on it. So if anybody wants to join our group and help us as we revise this manuscript, just let Kristen or I know.
Yeah, I
Because
was
it's an
thinking of
important
this.
paper, and there could be some, maybe we need to reframe a few things a little bit differently, especially based on this conversation today. So
I think it's the kind of the long picture of the life of this program, and how different groups have grown and developed and matured over time, and in partnership with their consortia would be very interesting. So, and I don't know if that's part of the paper you're working on or not, but be happy to help.
or at least review and give some comments and stuff. So yeah.
Chet, did you have something to add?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for letting me chime in here. I apologize. I came a little late to the meeting today. I had a longer clinic that went over time, but if I understand the project, and that means, engendering good working relationships with patients and researchers and physicians. I'm impressed by a couple of things. And I guess to summarize, it seems to me to be a very organic process if people are getting together anyway. And so I think having in-person meetings is really at the heart of this. It's very hard in a virtual, situation like this, but I know I contact patients, connect with them, in other ways automatically. So if I see them in clinic, like I just did, I have a patient come up with a totally interesting research idea. I have to stop and think about it, but you kind of develop the relationship by, seeing patients in the clinic venue. And then patients themselves, especially now, not so much 34 years ago, would get together and have their own patient meetings. And I know Matthew can speak to this too, but when patients get together and they do, say, co-sponsor a research meeting, but also have, all sorts of other activities going on that are sort of maybe patient generated or not dealing with the research, but how patients interact or deal with day-to-day things, that those in-person meetings just seem to make everything else happen. It's kind of organic. And I couldn't help but chuckle when somebody just mentioned having a short, was it a 3 or 4 minute talk about something? Who said that? I thought that was interesting. I will say, you're pointing up there, Kristen, but I can't tell if you're pointing to me.
You don't know what I'm looking at. Michelle, I think that was
Yeah,
Michelle.
it's
right?
Michelle.
It was the American Thoracic Society, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was hysterical because the World Symposium meeting that we have, it was started as a scientific meeting, and patients are given free registration, so to speak. You see that kind of thing happening, but just after the abstracts were reviewed for that meeting by the organizers, we got some feedback. The organizers said, let's not have the usual 15 minutes research presentation from the podium, but we're going to do something called rapid fire. And I was concerned this might not work because the format of only a few minutes per presentation met with some concerns. I mean, researchers just have gotten in the mold of communicating everything in that 15-minute interval. They're locked into it. So when people who got their abstract approved for presentation in the format at the meeting and told they were only going to have 4 minutes for presentation, or maybe it was 3 or 4 minutes for presentation and 6 minutes for questions, they didn't know how to handle it. They're still struggling with it. They don't know how to do an elevator talk. So I think you just have to get people used to that kind of stuff. But getting together, I think looking for those other situations or creating the other situations, so people have those personal relationships. Being together physically is huge. I even missed that with the RDCRN. When the pandemic interrupted, we investigators and other patient advocate leaders no longer met in person every 6 months. It was necessary. It's probably expensive, but that kind of thing, really breeds those kind of long-standing situations where research, where understanding the patient needs, their views on it really happen. That's all I want to say.
Just have to add to that, we have a patient education conference every other year for eosinophilic diseases. And from the very beginning of starting these conferences, we included as many patients that wanted to be there, they were invited, as well as researchers, physicians, industry. Everybody attends this conference. And as much as having the researchers talk about their research and all the updates, and we have the patients get up and tell their struggle and their story. And I can tell you that every aspect of that conference, whoever is there, the one compliment we get every time is it is so interesting and so important to have all these people together at one conference and sharing everybody's ideas and not having it just be research or just be patients. So I encourage other people to try and do that during their education meetings. It really looked highly upon from everybody. And I tell the physicians that when they're up there and they're speaking, and then we have lunch or we have breaks and the patients mingle with them, I'm like, you are the movie stars. You are like their idols. Like, just please don't just gather together with the other doctors. Please mingle with the patients. And even pharma gets such a kick out of like getting to really talk to patients because they're just at their, offices all day. They don't have this opportunity. So keep that in mind for other meetings you guys have.